What up? It's your boy T Bear Reactions. About to do some video game reaction right here, and this is for the homie Sleepyhead Dreed. They'll continue with his his ranking on some classic video games and video game consoles as well too though. So this one is based off the we can say either the second or low key the third iteration of a Game Boy or possibly fourth, because there's been a lot of iteration with the Game Boy because the Game Boy came one of the most popular handheld console as well through the years as well too, surpassing a good amount of them such as the Link, the TurboGrafx had, Game Gear as well too. One thing it was some come to is the Vita, which DS was competition to is that anyway. But still, it's still to the test time from the original Game Boy, Game Boy Slim, getting collaborated with Super Nintendo as Super Game Boy, and where it was all over when they introduced a new iteration of the Game Boy Color. And with that, we're gonna take a look at 10 underrated Game Boy Color games you should play. These games may not be talked about as much, or a lot of people may know, but not everybody else know about it. So, without further ado, this was definitely the thing they had before Game Boy Advance exists, which definitely was like one of the top ones, well too. And I guess you can include Virtual Boy somewhat in a way. But other than that, let's get it.
Who knew adding some color would cause an explosion of good games? The original Game Boy was already a juggernaut. Adding color to the games made some legendary experiences that hold up to this day. And just like the Game Boy, I'm gonna list 10 games you should dig out your mother's basement, or I guess your room. Like before, I'm limiting this to strictly Game Boy Color games, since we already listed the original Game Boy titles. In no particular order, here are 10 underrated Game Boy Color games you should play.
And we right said that there was game that was exclusive to Game Boy Color, meaning if you try to play it on a regular Game Boy, that's probably wasn't gonna work. Anyway.
Survival Kids was released for the Game Boy Color in 1999 by Konami. A survival Legend of Zelda style RPG where exploration for food and resources on the daily is the name of the game. You control either a boy
right there, just look like some Legend of Zelda right there.
Boy or a girl who was shipwrecked on a lost island after your possibly qualified father did an oopsie. From the start, you are told to explore the island for resources and hopefully a way to make it off the island. You can gather items off the ground and scavenge food for survival, but with only raw resources, will you get far? Well, you can combine materials to make better tools, such as a bow and arrow, whip, fishing rod, and such. Day to day, you are told to continuously explore, keep your hunger, thirst, and exhaustion meter satisfied by eating non-poisonous food and water, and getting rest in your empty discovered cabin every night before you pass out outside. Survival Kids is oddly super immersive for a late 90s Game Boy Color game, with you actually motivated to keep your character alive, along with a general curiosity for exploration you'll have day to day. It's similar to modern games like Minecraft, where you scavenge for resources to survive and prosper, and along with great visuals and OST, this game is worthy of the time you'll no doubt put into it. Yay! Survival Kids actually turned into a franchise as Survival Kids 2 was released in 2000 for the Game Boy Color, and its legacy continues with the Lost in Blue franchise on the Nintendo DS and Wii. So you can have all your fill of miserable kids you want, you absolute monster.
What's next?
Perfect Dark was released for the Game Boy Color in 2000s by Rare, a prequel to the N64 version made famous as a pseudo-sequel to GoldenEye 007. You controlled Joanna Dark as she completes her training to become
the Perfect Dark. I think I played that on the Switch game pack as well too.
an agent of Carrington Institute, and her first missions under the organization. This game is primarily played in the third person, with the player controlling Joanna in an isometric 3D view.
Cool.
The graphics, while blocky, are honestly impressive for these sections.
Is that for a Game Boy game? Hold on. For a Game Boy game at the time, it is impressive. Well, too. I low-key feel like Game Boy was like definitely not only was like the handheld compared to Nintendo, it like just said it became a better game than Nintendo as well too, graphic wise, in my opinion.
The animation moving fluidly between cycles. At first, you start with a rather long training section of the mechanics of the game, but then you go to multiple missions where you can go around fulfilling objectives, gunning down enemies and stealing their stuff, and honestly, it's really fun. This game also offers a first-person mode, but it's just like moving a mouse on screen, so just get it over with and move on. The game stresses that stealth can be a priority in some missions, but holy hell the enemies can be frustrating to sneak up on. You're supposed to walk slowly and avoid reloading to not trigger them, but sometimes their killbot senses activate, and they instantly target you even if not even looking in your direction. While you can get better at this is at its worst on the training stages, when getting spotted means the mission is failed over and over and over again. Another thing about this game, no music during gameplay, which can be frustrating, but you do get voice clips, which on the Game Boy Color is pretty neat. This may sound like I'm actually negative against this game, but it's just some cons to an overall enjoyable package on the go. This game also includes a multiplayer mode that is fun to play with friends if you ever find your link cable. And also, cheats can...
Oh man, that was one thing about the 2-player is the link cable to do that. Could be. I think I forgot what Game Boy Advance ended up doing for 2 players. I'm trying to remember as well too, but yeah, I was trying to remember that. But yeah, let's keep going.
Can be unlocked on the N64 version using the transfer pack. One thing is for certain, you definitely get bang for your buck
awesome.
This side experience.
That was something that's pretty cool that a lot of games did, like transfer stuff and over as well too. That they can do that. I think I forgot what another game you should do something like that. You can transfer over. That was pretty cool. They did that. They had something like that.
Now this looks cutesy, doesn't it? This doesn't gel with my hardcore pro MLG gamer calloused hands. So why should I or the rest of y'all play it? Well, hang tight, you'll find out soon. Wendy Every Which Way was released on Game Boy Color in 2001 and was made by WayForward. Based upon Wendy from the Casper animated series, this game is a simple platformer, with the player controlling Wendy through the levels as she looks to find stars and make it to the end of the level to find moonstones. Wendy can beat her enemies with magic, but at some point during the first level, you reach a place where you cannot progress. This is where the game's main gimmick comes into play. Wendy can change the gravity at will, allowing her and enemies to shift from floor to ceiling and allowing progression through otherwise inaccessible areas.
Awesome.
This mechanic is used throughout the game in some genuinely impressive level design and keeps players interested in continuing the game. Each world is split up between 3 side-scrolling stages.
Makes you want to play right. Finding a play right now is an emulator or something like that. If they had on Switch, I would definitely do it.
And 1 horizontal shooter stage, with an extra world being accessible if you play this on a Game Boy Advance. This game is short, with only 4 or 5 worlds available, but the graphics and sound are rather advanced for the color, being on the late end of the lifespan of the console. But if you're looking for an interesting platformer to try out, definitely Fly This Way.
We got nice.
Pocket Bomberman was released on Game Boy Color in 1998 by Hudson Soft. Technically, this game was released for the Game Boy in 1997, but it was also released as a better version launch title for the Game Boy Color, so I'm including it here. Classic Bomberman gameplay, but in a 2D vertical space. You control Man Bomber as he looks to blow up all the enemies and make it to the ending gate to go to the next level. As you blow up enemies and objects, all of the classic power-ups make an appearance, leading to bigger and more deadly explosions, which in turn leads to everyone's favorite pastime in this series, blowing themselves up with their own bombs. The change from a maze-like space to vertical platforms isn't too drastic, with ladders and other obstacles being used to simulate the same space. Pocket Bomberman is a pretty repetitive game, but overall, if you're craving that classic Bomberman gameplay on mobile, this is a game worth bringing about. This game also includes a jump mode minigame, which causes Bomberman to only jump and which will only require the player to use bombs, which, depending on the difficulty chosen, can be either a little nice distraction or a mode made for all the people in life you hate. Let me be serious for a quick second. I'm not being hypothetical or joking for goofs when I say Mario Tennis on the Game Boy Color is the best Mario Tennis game, not only as opposed to the N64 version, but maybe overall in the entire Mario Sports series. Yes, that includes all the modern games and their advancements. Nice. Let me explain why. Mario Tennis was released in 2000, first for the N64 and then the Game Boy Color by Camelot and Nintendo. The N64 and Game Boy versions shared a base tennis gameplay, but the mobile version adds in so much more. On top of the nice looking sprites and ported sound from the console version, you also get more courses, players, mini games, and even transfer pack capabilities. The big selling point, however, is the single player story mode, which is a full-fledged tennis RPG. You control the new student in a tennis academy, and you are tasked with rising through the ranks by playing the people who are ahead of you in both singles and doubles action with your new roommate. Along the way,
they say it's not in order, but it's starting to feel like it because like the games keep better and better.
You gather experience points by playing games, being tutored by instructors, and training using the available equipment, which can be used as you level up to upgrade your skills, including power, spin, control, and speed. These upgrades are continuous throughout your single-player journey, which will reflect your character getting better and better. You can also equip different equipment, which can also affect your stats and lead to a competitive edge on the tennis court. The best feature, however, you can use your custom character outside of the modes to bully the various unlockable characters in single-play mode, and can even import them to the N64 version to bully Mario into crying submission. This RPG mode takes this already great game to an even greater height, as this makes playing tennis over and over again a worthy investment that every Game Boy Color owner should have. For the people who know me, I have a, let's say, love and hate relationship with Quest 64. I've grown up with this game and played it in full on stream, twitch.tv/sleepyheaddre, but it undoubtedly has its issues, many issues. But did you know that Quest 64 has a full...
Now I'm interested, how can you, unless you're doing an emulator on a laptop, how was one play that on, Switch? Can you do that with Switch, maybe? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how it would. I don't think the game got to be available, of course, but I wonder how it would do that on put it on Twitch TV. That'd be interesting.
Mobile Game Boy Color port, and not just that, but that is actually good. Quest: Brian's Journey was released for the Game Boy Color in 2000 by Sunsoft, an almost full adaptation of the N64 version, but Game Boyified. Brian's Journey actually fits the 3D adventure into a fully 2D sprite-based cartridge. And not just that, but does it well. The game actually expands on the story by giving Master Brian a voice and adding in additional information and plot elements that help smooth the story out. In the world, you can wander around talking to civilians, go into houses, and find spirits to help power up your magic. Battle is the same as the N64 version, although a little more clunky on handheld, but still usable. You get access to 4 different elements that each do a different attack formation, such as wind being a homing attack and water being a straight line directly in front of the player. As you level up, you get increasingly stronger attack spells and support spells that can be used outside of battle. While not having as many buttons as the N64, the Game Boy more than handles the challenges without too much difficulty. As someone who grew up with the N64 version and never touched this one, it was odd playing this and recalling all the locations and songs that were demade for the Game Boy version, and it being really good. Like, this could have been a modern demake, it's that good. While the N64's version faults prevent it from being anything more than a cool one-time playthrough, the Game Boy Color version is worth playing over and over again.
What we got next?
Everybody knows the Game Boy and Game Boy Color were the stomping grounds for the monster collecting genre, headlined by the initial Pokemon games. The Dragon Quest monster game.
Somebody just said that too. That Pokemon is the reason why Game Boy had a long run, which I can understand and agree as well too. I think like it definitely held it down for Game Boy around the mid to late '90s as well too, because around like mid to late '90s, a lot of folks was gearing towards like a PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Dreamcast. I think Dreamcast. I don't think it was, but yeah. Nintendo 64 and all as well too. Though the handheld console was going downhill. Game Gear wasn't doing good. That's right. I almost got one more to know, man. We can play Sega Genesis game on there as well too, though. But Game Boy held his own, and when Pokemon came out for that, it was the game changer for sure. But yeah, let's keep going.
Games were also pretty popular in the color handheld, but how many people have heard of the Azure Dream franchise that had an entry on the Game Boy Color? Azure Dream was released on the Game Boy Color in 1999 by Konami. It was a port from the PS1 game, but added in multiple things and also lost out on some things in translation. You play as Ko, the son of famed MIA monster trainer Guy, who on his 15th birthday is granted access to the monster tower at the edge of town where riches can be found, possibly at the risk of deadly harm by his denizens. He is at first accompanied by his father's familiar, a dragon named Coon, who came to him with both memory loss and a powerful fireball attack to protect him as he scales all the floors of the tower. Gameplay of Azure Dream includes venturing up the randomly generated tower, starting from the first floor each time. Your actions include hunting for treasure, monster eggs that can spawn into collectible familiars that you can use in battle, and other such spoils, while battling the occupants of the tower in action turn-based RPG gameplay on the way up in order to find out what happened to Ko's father. Combat consists of moving through square movement spaces and positioning your familiar to attack enemies, also taking turns moving and attacking. Ko can equip himself to fight as well, but without the help of his familiars. He is DOA. This game goes in a different direction in the Pokemon franchise. However, it's not at all to its detriment. The Game Boy Color version of this game includes way more monsters in the PS1 version, as well as an extra underground dungeon that includes many more challenges and
that the console will have a little bit more feature than the home console one as well too. I mean a portable console will have more than the home console. That's very interesting, too, especially come from PlayStation 1 to Game Gear. I mean Game with Color. Yeah, so that's pretty interesting right there.
Monsters to collect. However, it does not include the city building and romance options that the PS1 version includes. While this cuts out some heavy gameplay features, the bare mechanics of the Collectathon game are enough to keep you occupied and even off the Pokemon game for longer than it takes to catch a legendary with Pokeballs.
Nice.
Now, don't look at me like that, I'm just as surprised as you are, but it's true. John Romero's Super Flop on the N64 actually produced a really good Game Boy Color game.
Wow.
Daikatana was released on the Game Boy Color in 2000, the same year as the original Daikatana. As opposed
how bad was that game for him to call it a flop?
to Ion Storm on the main games, the Game Boy Color games were developed by Will and published by Kimco. Since an FPS on Game Boy Color was pretty much DOA, the game was developed instead as an overhead adventure game, very Zelda-like in its approach. You control Hiro Miyamoto, a sword master who, after his dojo is attacked and friend is kidnapped, must go around level after level in different time periods.
Why look here like I'm tripping. Why I look like Chun-Li for a minute?
Battling the rival Mishima clan in the hunt for the legendary Daikatana sword. You move in a top-down screen-scrolling perspective with enemies spawning on screens along with items that can be picked up and puzzles that need to be solved in order to progress. This game also features dungeons that have a boss at the end that need to be...
Something about Game Boy music just is heaven to my ear. I don't know why, I just love it. I just that little end to it, I love it. I don't know why.
Defeated in order to progress. All of this is not so much Zelda like as opposed to a different plot wearing a Zelda skin. But what's wrong with that? The mobile game, as opposed to the console versions, is pretty absorbent. The game is fun to play and explores the various areas in order to find a way forward, and all of the weapons you can get keeps the combat interesting from level to level. I would like to say maybe if this was the only game released in the Daikatana franchise, then maybe the series wouldn't have such a toxic reputation. But then, how would John Romero make us his bitch, repping the cyberpunk legend of Zelda?
Here we go. Last.
Okay, show of hands. Who even knew before this video
guy-
that Shadow of the Ninja on the
Shadow of the
NES
Ninja,
had a
okay.
sequel at all? Return of the Ninja was released for the Game Boy Color in 2001
looks good
by
already.
Act Japan and
I ain't gonna lie,
Natsume,
it looks good
a
right
sequel
there.
to the 1990 NES game Shadow of the Ninja. Return of the Ninja retains the original platform
It got a little bit of a Nintendo like pixel in a way too, but a little more motion though. I like
forming
it.
gameplay. You choose between two ninjas, Tsukikage and Sayuri, and are set loose to recover various shinobi tools to master the art of ninjutsu. A basic beat 'em up with stealth mechanics, each ninja traverses across each level with a close range attack and a 2-layered projectile attack that's differentiated by each ninja. Holding for a little bit will unleash a small shuriken attack, but if you hold it all the way, you unleash a bigger attack. You also have a sub-weapon that you can only use if you have a Magatama in your inventory, which varies by item but overall performs a partial screen clearing move. Also hidden around levels are items which unlock more moves for your ninja to do, such as backflips, climbing walls, and digging in the dirt. The various ways you can get through the enemies make fighting generally enjoyable, though you are generally encouraged to actually be a ninja and avoid being spotted. The rank at the end of the level is also affected by how many times you were spotted and how quick you finish the level. If you enjoyed the original game released 10 years prior, then you'll enjoy this just as much or even more. Though because it's released at the tail end of the Game Boy Color's lifespan, I don't blame you if this gem fell through the cracks.
Alright, last but not least.
Now let's end off this list with a game starring a Disney icon. No, not overrated Mickey. There we go.
Ah, damn, he called. Damn, he straight called me overrated. Damn.
The best of the original three. Donald Duck Going Quackers was released in 2000.
The graphics was great. The graphics was great right there.
First for the Game Boy Color, then was released for the PlayStation, Windows, N64, Dreamcast, PS2, GBA, and GameCube. A simple platformer starring Donald Duck on the hunt for Daisy, who's been kidnapped. The GBC version is a strictly 2D affair, which is different from the rest of the versions, which offer shifts to a 3D perspective. Donald can gather collectibles and jump on enemies to defeat them, while looking for a scroll in each level. One hit, and Donald gets pissed. Second hit, you lose a life. The swirling pickup causes Donald to go berserk mode, where he runs and destroys everything in his way, including walls and hatches on the floor. The jumping is tight where the platforming doesn't feel cheap, and all of the pickups help the game not feel unfair. The game may start easy in the jungle levels, but as you progress, the game actively gets a little challenging, with the later bosses becoming major threats. The game is simple, to the point, but provides an excellent portable adventure to keep you occupied. The other versions may offer advanced graphics, but nothing can beat a solid, tight 2D adventure.
True.
Have any other games that
Side-scrolling is always a good comeback, for real, man.
should be on this list? Leave them in the comments, and look forward to a new advanced list in the future.
Now I'm dancing. That's from Mario. That's for Mario World, Mario Land 2. The one the space boards. But other than that, shout out to Sleepyhead Dree as well too. Though as I'm getting a Sleepyhead myself. Other than that though, if you like my reaction to these, like, share, subscribe, use your channel. I can't wait to do more of his videos though. I got a list of, I got a lot in my playlist for them to check out. But anyway, it's your boy T-Bear signing off. One love.